My cousin mocked my career choice for years until he lost his job. That's when he decided to destroy the startup I had built through theft, harassment, and identity fraud. So I let him dig his own grave while recording everything. My dad told me, learn plumbing. People will always need water and toilets fixed, and nobody wants to do it anymore. When I was 19, I'd just finished my freshman year at State College, majoring in computer science like literally everyone else in my family. Got decent grades, had an internship lined up at a startup. The whole path was laid out. But Dad pulled me aside at our 4th of July barbecue. Dad wasn't a plumber himself, he was an accountant, but he'd been doing the books for his plumber friend Tony for 20 years. I followed him into his home office, away from all my cousins bragging about their internships. He pulled out Tony's tax returns and pointed at the numbers. Tony cleared $180,000 last year. No college debt. Home by 5 every day. Then he showed me another folder. This is my friend with an MBA from Wharton. $65,000 a year, still paying loans, and his company just announced another round of restructuring. That conversation ate at me for weeks. I kept thinking about it during my unpaid internship, fetching coffee and pretending to learn about synergy. Meanwhile, my sink was leaking, and the landlord said it'd be 3 weeks before a plumber could come look at it. 3 weeks for a leak. Finally, I made the call that horrified everyone. I dropped out and asked Tony for an apprenticeship. My mom cried. My aunts whispered about how I was wasting my potential. My cousins had a field day. Within a month, I'd bought a hit-up van for $3,000 and was waking up at 5 a.m. to follow Tony around. My tool collection was a mismatched set from garage sales and Tony's old extras. I smelled like PVC glue and had purple primer stains on everything I owned. Thanksgiving that year was brutal. My cousins were showing off their LinkedIn profiles and talking about their networking events and leadership development programs. They'd ask me about my career path and laugh when I said I was learning to sweat copper pipes. One cousin literally said, "At least you'll never need a gym membership carrying those wrenches around." Another kept joking that I was preparing for the apocalypse. When society collapses, we'll need someone who can fix the toilets. They'd post Instagram stories from their windowed offices and tag me. Views from the top. Meanwhile, I was posting nothing because nobody wants to see the inside of a crawl space at 6 a.m. I'll admit, crawling under houses in January while my cousins posted about their company ski retreats made me question everything. But then I'd remember Tony pulling up to the shop in his new truck, talking about his vacation home, working exactly 0 weekends. For 4 years, I ground it out, got my journeyman license, then my master's, learned every code requirement, started to notice patterns. Emergency calls were paying $500 an hour. Commercial contracts were going begging because there weren't enough qualified plumbers. The old guys were retiring and nobody was replacing them. While my cousins were competing with 10,000 other kids for entry-level positions, I was getting calls from desperate property managers. One emergency weekend call to a restaurant paid more than my cousins made in a month, so I made my move. I bought out Tony's client list when he retired, not for pennies on the dollar like some vultures do, but for a fair price that let him and his wife move to Florida comfortably. The whole family thought I was insane taking on that kind of debt at 23. My cousin Brad, the gym membership comedian, actually laughed out loud when I told him at my sister Amy's birthday dinner, "You're going to owe money until you're 50 for a bunch of phone numbers?" He was 3 beers in and getting louder. Meanwhile, I just got promoted to senior developer. Stock options, baby. I started hitting Tony's client list hard. Every morning I'd call 5 customers, introduce myself, offer a free inspection. Most were relieved to hear Tony had a successor they could trust. Within 2 months, I had steady commercial contracts with 3 apartment complexes and a strip mall. The property managers were desperate for someone reliable who actually showed up when promised. My phone rang constantly. I hired my first employee, a kid named Marcus, who reminded me of myself, eager but clueless. Teaching him felt like paying forward what Tony taught me. Brad lost his job 3 months later. The startup ran out of funding. He didn't tell anyone for weeks, just kept showing up to family dinners in his company hoodie, talking about pivoting and new opportunities. I only found out because I ran into him at Home Depot at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, studying the plumbing aisle. He tried to play it off like he was fixing something at home, but I saw the plumbing code book in his cart. "Just curious about what you do," he said, not meeting my eyes. The sabotage started small. One morning, I showed up to find my van's tires deflated. Not slashed, just deflated. Annoying, but not destructive. Then my business cards started disappearing from the local hardware stores where I'd left them. The store owners said someone had been taking whole stacks. I figured it was just bad luck until the state inspector showed up at 3 of my job sites in 1 week. Same inspector each time, asking about permits I definitely had, looking for violations that didn't exist. The 3rd time, he let slip that someone had called in anonymous complaints about unsafe practices. My insurance company called the next week. My premium was tripling. When I asked why, they mentioned recent safety concerns brought to their attention. No specifics, just vague mentions of industry reports. I started checking online review sites and found new 1-star reviews with photos of my work truck parked slightly crooked, captions about reckless contractors who don't follow basic safety. The usernames were random letters and numbers, all created within days of each other. Marcus came to me nervous one morning. "Hey boss, weird thing. Got a call last night. Some guy saying you're operating without proper insurance, that I could get in legal trouble working for you." My other new hire, Devin, had gotten the same call. They'd both hung up, but it rattled them. Devin's wife was pregnant. indignant. He couldn't afford any legal problems. I showed them my insurance documents, my licenses, everything. They stayed, but I could see the doubt creeping in. Then things escalated. I started noticing Brad's car near my job sites. Not every time, but enough to form a pattern. He'd park down the street, pretend to be on his phone. I mentioned it to my sister Amy at Sunday dinner, trying to keep it casual. She rolled her eyes. He's probably just bored. You know how he gets without a job. But our mom pulled me aside later. Brad's mother has been saying things at church about how you're running some kind of scam, that Tony didn't properly transfer the business. I showed her the paperwork, the bill of sale, everything legitimate and notarized. She believed me, but the damage was spreading. My permit applications started hitting mysterious delays. Jobs that should have been approved in days stretched to weeks. The permit office kept finding clerical errors that required resubmission. I recognized the clerk who kept rejecting them, a young woman who'd started bringing Brad coffee when I was waiting in line. They'd chat and laugh while I stood there with my corrected forms. One time I heard her say, "Your cousin's here again," and they both smirked. The copper theft changed everything. I'd installed security cameras after small tools started disappearing from job sites. Just basic stuff at first. Channel locks, pipe cutters. I figured it was opportunistic theft, maybe local kids. But then I lost $500 worth of copper pipes from a renovation site. The cameras caught everything. Brad's car pulling up at 2 a.m., Brad in a baseball cap loading pipes into his trunk. Clear as day, license plate visible. I sat on that footage for a week, unsure what to do. Family is family, even when they're trying to destroy your business. But then, the fake reviews got worse. Customers claiming I'd flooded their basements, cracked their foundations, overcharged by thousands. Each review had just enough detail to sound plausible, but was completely fabricated. 3 real clients called to cancel contracts. "We just can't take the risk," one said. "We've been reading things." The apprentice situation was the final straw. Marcus told me Brad had approached him at a gas station, offered him double wages to jump ship and bring client contacts. He said he's starting his own company, that yours is going under anyway. Marcus recorded part of the conversation on his phone. Brad's voice was clear. "Just get me the client list and the supplier accounts. He'll never prove anything." I started building my case methodically, downloaded all the fake reviews, documenting their creation dates and patterns, kept logs of every delayed permit, every suspicious inspection. Amy helped more than she let on, forwarding me emails where Brad had tried to recruit her husband. "Tell them what you know about your brother's business," one read. "We could make this all go away if you cooperate." She was furious. I stayed neutral as long as I could, but this is too much. My dad found Tony's original documents in his filing system, every transfer form perfectly legitimate. He'd kept copies of everything from his 20 years of doing Tony's books. "I knew something like this might happen," he said. "People get desperate when they see someone younger succeeding." He also found something interesting. Brad had been researching plumbing businesses for sale, making lowball offers that got rejected. He wanted what I had, but didn't want to work for it. The family reunion was in 3 weeks. Brad had been telling everyone he had big news to announce. I had a feeling I knew what it was. My supplier confirmed my suspicions when he called. "Your cousin was just here asking about setting up a commercial account. Said he's launching next month. Already has several contracts lined up." The contracts he mentioned sounded suspiciously like my clients. I spent those 3 weeks preparing, had my lawyer draft cease and desist letters for the fake reviews, filed a police report for the copper theft with the security footage, documented every single act of sabotage with dates, times, and evidence. But I also kept working, landed 2 new commercial contracts, hired another apprentice, my cousin Lisa, who'd been working retail and hating it. She'd supported me from day one, never made jokes, always asked how the business was growing. The morning of the reunion, 3 of the clients Brad thought he'd stolen signed new contracts with me. They'd been playing along on my request, letting him think he'd poached them. "We wanted to see how far he'd go," one property manager told me. "Pretty sick what he's been doing to you." They'd recorded their conversations with him, where he'd explicitly claimed to be taking over my contracts through better service and proper insurance. At the reunion, Brad stood up during dinner with a champagne glass, started his announcement about his new plumbing company, how he'd already secured major contracts, how sometimes the student becomes the master. That's when I stood up too, pulled out my phone and played the security footage on the TV. The room went silent, watching Brad steal copper pipes at 2 a.m. His permit office girlfriend dumped him by text before dessert was served. The fake reviews got traced back to his IP address after the police got involved. His business license application was denied for fraud. Brad's now working at a hardware store, still paying off the lawyer who couldn't keep him from getting charged with theft. He asked me for a job last month, said he'd work for apprentice wages, that he'd learned his lesson. I told him I'd already hired Lisa, who was turning out to be naturally gifted with pipe fitting. She'd never tried to sabotage anyone, never stolen anything, never made fake reviews. Funny how that works out. My business is booming. Turns out when you focus on actually doing good work instead of tearing others down, customers notice. Who would have thought? The hardware store manager called me 2 weeks after the reunion. "Your cousin's been asking a lot of questions about commercial accounts again," he said. "Thought you should know." I thanked him and hung up, wondering when Brad would finally give up. The theft charges had stuck. Community service and restitution, nothing that would land him in jail, but enough to tank any chance at a contractor's license for years. Yet here he was, still circling my business like a shark that couldn't admit the ocean had moved on. Lisa was working out better than I'd hoped. She had steady hands and actually listened when I explained why we did things certain ways. Marcus Marcus had started training her on the basics while I handled the commercial jobs. Devin's wife had their baby, and I gave him 2 weeks paid leave even though we were swamped. That's when I noticed my supplier's delivery truck driving past our job site without stopping. The driver called me an hour later, confused. Someone called and canceled your order, said you were switching suppliers. I hadn't canceled anything. The order was for a restaurant renovation starting Monday. $3,000 worth of materials I needed on site. I called the supplier's office, and they played me the voicemail. The voice was muffled, but the callback number was Brad's old work cell. He'd kept it active, apparently. I had to drive 2 hours to another supplier to get the materials, paying rush fees that ate into my profit margin. Lisa helped me load everything while Marcus handled our regular service calls. Why would someone do that? She asked, genuinely puzzled. I explained Brad's history while we drove back. Her face darkened. He's the one who told my mom you'd probably go under within a year, said I was making a mistake working for you. That was news to me, but not surprising. The next morning, I found Marcus at a job site looking frustrated. The property manager had called him directly, saying I'd sent a message about Marcus taking over the contract. She showed me the email, Marcus said. Had your company logo and everything. The email address was 1 letter off from mine. Easy to miss if you weren't looking carefully. The message praised Marcus's work and suggested he was ready to handle accounts independently, implying I was planning to let him go. I spent an hour on the phone with the property manager, explaining the situation. She believed me eventually, but the seed of doubt was there. Maybe you should look into better email security, she suggested, as if I hadn't already changed passwords and enabled 2-factor authentication on everything. But Brad wasn't hacking accounts. He was creating fake ones, exploiting the trust I'd built with clients. Devin came back from leave to find his van's registration had expired, except it hadn't. Someone had reported it stolen, then canceled the report, but not before the DMV flagged it. Took 3 trips to the courthouse to sort out, each one during business hours when he should have been working. I can't keep missing work for this stuff, he told me, stress evident in his voice. My wife's already worried about the steady income. I gave him a raise on the spot, hoping it would help, but I could see him checking job listings on his lunch break. Amy called me that weekend. Brad's been reaching out to extended family, she said. Cousins from Dad's side who don't know the whole story. He's painting himself as the victim, saying you stole Tony's business and ruined his chances. She forwarded me screenshots from a family group chat I wasn't part of. Brad's version had me scheming from the beginning, manipulating Tony in his retirement, using family connections to block Brad's legitimate business attempts. Several cousins I hadn't seen in years were sympathizing with him. I decided to focus on what I could control, the work. Landed a contract with a medical office building, 6 floors of aging pipes that needed systematic replacement. It was the biggest job I'd taken on, requiring careful scheduling to avoid disrupting patient care. Lisa and I spent a whole Sunday mapping out the building's plumbing system, planning our approach. Marcus would handle our regular maintenance calls while we tackled floors one by one. Monday morning, the building manager met us looking concerned. I got a call from the health department, she said. Anonymous tip about unlicensed contractors working on medical facilities. I showed her my licenses, all current and properly displayed in my truck. The health inspector arrived an hour later, went through everything with a microscope. Found nothing wrong, of course, but we lost half a day of work. The inspector mentioned they'd been getting a lot of false reports lately. Seems like contractors trying to sabotage each other, he said. Waste of everyone's time. Brad's car showed up across from the medical building that afternoon, not even trying to hide anymore, just sitting there watching us work. Lisa noticed him first. Is that? I nodded and kept working. Let him watch. Every pipe we installed was to code, every connection tested, but his presence made everyone nervous. Devin kept glancing over. Marcus double-checked work he'd done perfectly the first time. The psychological warfare was working even when the practical sabotage failed. The fake invoice situation nearly cost me the medical building contract. Someone had sent an invoice on my company letterhead billing for work we hadn't done. Emergency repairs supposedly performed after hours, billed at triple rate. The building manager called me furious. Is this how you operate? Sneaking in extra charges? It took an hour to prove the invoice was fake, comparing it to my real ones, showing the discrepancies in formatting and invoice numbering. But damage was done. She insisted on written confirmation for every single task going forward, tripling my paperwork. Marcus quit a week later. Not because of Brad directly, but the stress was getting to everyone. I got an offer from a bigger company, he said. Better benefits, more stability. I can't deal with all this drama. I couldn't blame him. Losing him meant Lisa and I were pulling 12-hour days to keep up with contracts. Devin stepped up, taking on more responsibility, but I could see the strain. His wife called me once, worried about the long hours and all the weird stuff happening. That's when I found out about the loan applications. My bank called about unusual activity. Someone had applied for business loans in my company's name at 3 different banks. The applications had enough accurate information to get past initial screening, but fell apart under scrutiny. Each one claimed I was desperately seeking capital to stay afloat, that the business was failing. The loan officer who called knew me well enough to question it, but what about the banks that didn't know me? How many rejections were now on my record? Dad helped me file fraud alerts with all the credit bureaus. This is beyond family squabbles, he said. Brad's committing actual crimes, but proving it was him versus some random scammer was nearly impossible. The applications came from public computers at libraries, used disposable email addresses. All I had was circumstantial evidence and timing that seemed too convenient to be coincidence. The medical building job kept us afloat through the chaos. Every floor we completed proved our competence, and the building manager slowly warmed back up. Other tenants started asking about plumbing upgrades, seeing the quality of our work. But Brad escalated again. This time he went after my suppliers directly, calling as a concerned customer, reporting that I hadn't paid bills. 2 suppliers put my account on hold until I could prove payment history. More hours lost to administrative battles instead of actual work. Lisa surprised me with her response to the pressure. Instead of folding, she got angry. "This is bullshit," she said one afternoon, covered in pipe dope and sweat. "You're running an honest business, and this jackass is trying to tear it down because he's jealous." She started documenting everything obsessively. Photos of every job site, timestamps on arrivals and departures, copies of every receipt and invoice. If he wants to play games, we need proof of everything. The restraining order attempt was my breaking point. I came home to find legal papers taped to my door. Brad had filed for a protective order, claiming I was harassing him and his new business ventures. The irony would have been funny if it wasn't so infuriating. His evidence? Photos of my truck at multiple locations where he was conducting business, my own job sites where he'd been stalking me. The hearing was set for next week, right in the middle of finishing the medical building. Amy went to court with me, along with Dad and 3 clients who'd witnessed Brad's behavior. The judge dismissed the order within minutes, warning Brad about filing false claims. But it was another day lost, another public record making me look like trouble. Devin didn't say anything, but I saw him update his resume that night in the office. Can't blame a man for keeping options open when his boss is constantly in some kind of drama. 2 days later, the medical building's fire suppression system triggered on the floor we'd just finished. Water everywhere, soaking new drywall and flooding the floor below. Initial investigation suggested a valve had been tampered with, opened just enough to cause a slow leak that eventually triggered the sensors. The security footage was conveniently corrupted for that time period. I spent 18 hours straight fixing the damage, Lisa beside me the whole time. We saved the contract, but barely. Brad made his next move through social media. A Facebook page appeared called "Protect Yourself from Shady Contractors," featuring anonymous stories about plumbers who overcharged, damaged property, and disappeared with deposits. Each story had details that almost but not quite matched my jobs. Close enough that clients might wonder, different enough that I couldn't claim defamation. The page gained hundreds of followers within days, mostly fake accounts, but some real people who didn't know better. My lawyer sent cease and desist letters, but new pages popped up as fast as we could shut them down. Know your rights against contractor fraud, local plumbing horror stories, each one more creative than the last. They never mentioned me by name, just dropped hints about young plumbers who bought their way into the business and contractors who learned from questionable mentors. Tony called me, upset that they were dragging his reputation into it. I assured him none of this was his fault, but I could hear the hurt in his voice. The scheduling sabotage was subtle but effective. Someone kept calling my clients to confirm appointments at wrong times. Customers would be home waiting when we were scheduled for next week, or gone when we showed up as planned. Each confusion took time to sort out, made us look disorganized. Lisa started calling every client the night before to confirm, adding another hour to each day's work. But even that didn't stop the confusion when someone called right after her with different information. I finally caught a break when one of Brad's fake customers made a mistake. They left a voicemail complaining about work I'd supposedly done at an address that turned out to be a vacant lot. The phone number traced back to a burner phone, but the voicemail mentioned specific plumbing codes that had been updated just last month. Only someone actively studying for a license would know those details. I saved that recording, added it to my growing file of evidence. Devin gave his notice on a Friday. "I'm sorry," he said. "You've been a great boss, but I can't bring this stress home anymore. My wife's anxious all the time, worried about what's going to happen next." I wrote him a glowing recommendation and meant every word. He'd stuck it out longer than most would have, down to just me and Lisa, with more work than 2 people could handle. Something had to give. The solution came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Patterson, one of Tony's oldest clients, called me for her annual water heater check. While I was working, she mentioned her grandson was looking for work. Just got out of the military, good with his hands, needs something stable. I hired Alec on the spot, partly for the help, and partly because I liked the idea of having someone around who wouldn't be easily intimidated. His first day, Brad drove by the job site and quickly left when Alec stared him down. But Brad wasn't done. The next phase involved my bond insurance. Every licensed contractor needs a bond to protect customers if something goes wrong. Someone had been filing false claims against mine, small amounts, just under the threshold that would trigger investigation. Each claim required paperwork, responses, proof that the work was done correctly. The bond company started asking questions about why I had so many disputes. My rates went up again. Lisa found the pattern in the claims. Each one referenced a different type of water heater, but they all described the same fictional problem with the pressure relief valve. "He's using a template," she said, showing me her notes, changing details but keeping the same basic complaint. We submitted this to the bond company, and they started rejecting claims that fit the pattern. Small victory, but it felt good to fight back with something concrete. The medical building job wrapped up ahead of schedule despite everything. The manager was so impressed she recommended me to 3 other property management companies. Each new contract felt like defiance. Brad could slow me down but couldn't stop me from doing good work. Alec was working out well, learning fast and taking no nonsense from anyone. Lisa had developed into a skilled plumber in her own right. We were surviving, even growing. growing. Then Brad overplayed his hand. He showed up at a job site where I was working alone, replacing a sump pump in a basement. Started recording video on his phone, narrating about unsafe working conditions and code violations that didn't exist. I kept working, ignoring him, until he got closer and started touching my tools, moving things around to make the scene look worse for his video. That's when I started recording too. "Please don't touch my equipment," I said calmly. "You're creating a safety hazard." He smirked and kicked over my toolbox, sending wrenches scattering. "Look at this mess," he said to his camera. "Tools everywhere. Totally unprofessional." I documented everything, including his license plate as he drove away. This wasn't just harassment anymore. Interfering with an active job site was criminal. The police report led nowhere, as expected. "Family dispute," they said. "Try to work it out between yourselves." But the video served another purpose. I sent it to every family member who'd been getting Brad's version of events. No commentary, just the raw footage of him sabotaging my work site while I tried to do my job. The extended family group chat went quiet after that. A few cousins reached out privately to apologize for believing his stories. Amy organized an intervention of sorts. Not a formal thing, just a family dinner where she invited Brad's parents, ours, and a few neutral relatives. "This has to stop," she said. "Whatever happened with the business, this harassment is destroying the family." Brad's mother defended him at first, saying he was just trying to make an honest living. But when Amy showed printed screenshots of fake reviews, fraudulent loan applications, and the video from my job site, even she went quiet. "I trained for this," Brad said when confronted. "I studied just as hard as he did. Why should he get Tony's business just because he started first?" The entitlement in his voice was staggering. 4 years of apprenticeship, 2 more for master certification, thousands of hours under houses and in mechanical rooms. He equated a few months of reading code books to all of that. His father told him to stop making excuses. His mother cried. Nothing got resolved, but at least everything was in the open. The next morning, I found Brad's business cards at my supply house. Brad's Budget Plumbing. Why pay more? With my company logo poorly photoshopped and modified. The supplier pulled them immediately, banned Brad from the store. Word spread through the contractor network. Other suppliers started sharing stories of Brad trying to use my account numbers, claiming to be a new employee. The community was small enough that reputation mattered, and Brad's was shot. But the damage to my business was real. The constant fires meant less time for growth, fewer new contracts pursued. I was making money but not building the company I'd envisioned. Alec and Lisa were solid, but I needed more help to take on bigger jobs. Every time I got close to hiring, another crisis would hit. Brad couldn't succeed, but he was succeeding at keeping me from reaching my potential. The war of attrition was working. I made a decision that surprised everyone, including myself. Instead of continuing to fight Brad's sabotage defensively, I went on offense. Filed a civil suit for tortious interference with business relations. My lawyer had been suggesting it for months, but I'd hesitated because of family. Now I had enough documentation to paper a small room. Fake reviews with IP addresses, fraudulent loan applications, recorded harassment, witness statements from clients and suppliers. Time to use it. Brad got served at the hardware store. His manager called me later, said Brad had gone pale reading the papers. The lawsuit itemized every incident, every lost contract, every hour spent fighting false claims instead of working. The damages were significant but realistic, not trying to bankrupt him, just recover what his harassment had cost. More importantly, it put everything on legal record. No more he-said family drama, just facts and evidence. His response was predictable. Counterclaim alleging I'd stolen Tony's business, defamed him to suppliers, created a monopoly in the local plumbing market. His lawyer was a cheap one who specialized in DUIs, clearly out of his depth. My attorney dismantled each claim with documentation. Tony provided an affidavit about the legitimate sale. Suppliers testified about Brad's fraudulent behavior. The monopoly claim was laughable. There were 40 licensed plumbers in our area. While the legal process ground forward, I focused on rebuilding. Hired 2 more apprentices, Victoria and Sandy, both career changers looking for stable trades. Alec had developed enough to run his own jobs. Lisa was studying for her journeyman exam. Despite Brad's best efforts, we were becoming the company I'd envisioned. Professional, reliable, growing. Even got custom uniforms with our logo. Looked sharp pulling up to commercial sites. The settlement negotiations were brief. Brad's lawyer saw the evidence and advised him to cut his losses. We settled for a restraining order, a cease and desist on all business interference, and enough money to cover my legal fees. No admission of guilt, which let Brad save face, but the message was clear. The harassment stopped overnight. No more fake reviews, no more mysterious calls to clients, no more Brad lurking at job sites, just blessed silence. I saw him at the hardware store one last time, buying residential fixtures. He was doing handyman work, I heard, small repairs that didn't require licensing. We made eye contact across the plumbing aisle. He looked tired, defeated. Part of me felt sorry for him. The rest remembered the sleepless nights, the lost contracts, Devin leaving, Marcus quitting, Tony's hurt voice. I nodded politely and went back to shopping for the hospital expansion project we'd just landed. 6 months later, the business was thriving beyond my original dreams.